Recording in progress.
Thank you, Chair Lennox. Everything good for you to start with the meeting.
All right, I think you can hear me well, and another week on the road here, so virtual meetings it is. I've also managed to fight my way through another cold over the holiday season, so my voice is still not back to 100%, so I apologize if it's hard to understand me forcing my voice. Welcome everybody to the Planning Committee for Wednesday, January 11th, 2023 already. And recognize that we are holding this on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin First Nation. I'm just working off my agenda here through email, so hopefully it's the most current edition, and I'd like to see if we have a motion to adopt the agenda. I see Director McCormick, yes, and maybe we'll have Director Gisborne as seconder. Thank you. And just moving down here. Do we have any discussion on the matter? All in favor of the motion?
Sorry, but something isn't working here.
Oh, do we wait?
If you could, yes. Okay. Come have a look at my screen. Sorry about this. I haven't done this before.
No, that's okay.
Some minor technical difficulties.
No Mercury retrograde for another week, so whatever.
Is that what's happening? Is that what's happening, Sandy?
Yeah, we just have a new
Roger.
New Roger.
There's coffee.
All right, thank you, Chair Lennox. Everybody's back in the room.
I think we passed a motion to adopt the minutes. Great.
The agenda.
The agenda. We're at the
agenda now. And we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. Mover. Director Gisborne, I see, and again, Director McCormick, seconder. Any discussion on the minutes of our last meeting? Seeing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? Don't see anybody else available. All right, motion is passed. I don't see any delegations or inquiries. Nothing on here about unfinished business. And I see we received some correspondence from Jennifer Dyson, Chair of the Provincial Agricultural Land Commission. Congratulations. Any discussion on the correspondence? Business rising, I should say. Seeing none, we'll carry on into section 8 on reports. 8.1, application for the subdivision of the agricultural land reserve lots 3 and 4, district lot 1640, addresses of 9758 Old Lund Road and 9703 Prior Road in my electoral area A. I see a mover here, Director Gisborne, thank you. Seconder. Again, Director McCormick, you guys are active today. That's great. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Yes, I see Director McCormick.
Gisborne.
Or sorry, Gisborne. Sorry, I'm seeing hands there, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I am the representative for the Agricultural Advisory Committee. This matter usually goes to Agricultural Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, we didn't have quorum, so that's why there's nothing here from the Agricultural Advisory Committee. But the committee members that were in attendance, when taking a look at this application, I know it says subdivision, but really it's just the redrawing of a property line. So before other ALR property owners get excited about, oh, we've got subdivisions going through, this isn't the typical subdivision that most people think of. This is redrawing a property line. So hearing from the other members of the Agricultural Advisory, even though we didn't have quorum, they all said this seemed like a no-brainer.
Sorry, I'm getting some feedback here from somebody, so if we can just mute if we're not participating. Thank you.
Okay,
Go ahead.
that sounds good. So this item I've got no objections to. It makes sense. And it's not like we're taking a big chunk of land and chopping it up into smaller sections. It's just redrawing a line. So from the members of the committee that, of course, we weren't able to meet, there was no concerns or objections from anyone I heard. So I have no concerns or objection myself. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, just multitasking here. Any other discussion from any other directors? I'll add to the discussion. I took a drive and I've seen the maps and all the material related to the report. It's a good report, and took a drive to see the actual physical location, and it's quite apparent from the description is actually quite good in there about the intent of this redrawing of the lines, and it should provide better access for the users of the property and not take away from any of the intent that I can see. So I'm supportive of this as well. Any further discussion on the matter? Don't see any now, so we will all those in favor. I don't see anybody opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you. Move on to new business, residential 9.1 residential flexibility OCP amendments. Director Gisborne, maybe we can have you explain that the recommendation that the planning committee recommends staff to report back on possible OCP amendments to increase and improve residential flexibility options, and a suggestion that the restriction on dwelling units be redefined up to 5,000 square feet of residential space.
Yep.
Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. With permission from the chair and the committee, I would like up to 10 minutes for a short presentation discussion on this agenda item. The proposed motion asks for a staff report on residential flexibility changes in the OCP, with the suggestion of redefining the term dwelling unit to be a maximum of 5,000 square feet of residential space. This item was added to the agenda to stimulate a discussion and a conversation among directors. If the committee would like more time to digest some of the ideas and postpone the request for a staff report so that directors could have more time to consider and provide input on the direction, I would be supportive, because this is kind of a big change in the fundamentals. In this presentation, I will also be touching on some dark history. This is not intended to be any form of criticism for any member of the board, any member of staff, or any member of the public. This is long history. So, big issue that I think we're all kind of dealing with is this housing crisis. It's a hot topic on everyone's mind. For those of us that own our own home, we are somewhat protected from the direct impacts of this crisis. However, the indirect impacts are noticeable and substantial. Our ability to retain staff, an individual's economic mobility, cost of living, ability for our children to live here in the future, they're all woven into this real complicated issue. There's a great deal of factors that are entirely out of the hands of local government. If we wish to advocate for changes to those factors, I would suggest those are items for the committee of the whole for motions to AVICC and UBCM. There are some factors, though, that are in the hands of local government. For the planning committee, land use planning, zoning bylaws, development approvals, and it's my opinion that there is a problem in this system at a fundamental level. Now, where this problem came from, in my opinion, goes all the way back to 1914, when the provincial legislature passed the Shaughnessy Settlement Act. It restricted development to single-family houses, one of the first zoning bylaws in the world, right here in this province. It was a single-family zoning bylaw. And that same year, Harlan Bartholomew became the first full-time public sector city planner in America. In 1919, Harlan proposed restrictions on access to housing in order to prevent movement into, quote, finer residential districts by colored people. In St. Louis, he noted that without a previous zoning law, such neighborhoods have become run down and, quote, where values have depreciated. Homes are either vacant or occupied by colored people. what they had done south of the border was they had found a way to circumvent the Constitution by segregating based on economics rather than race. And this was made possible by specifying what a single dwelling house and assigning a single use with only one dwelling allowed. Single use zoning and single family zoning became the popular choice among North American communities in the 1920s. Harlan's plans and influence continued up until his retirement in the early 60s. I believe Director McCormick is from the city of Vancouver. She's heard the things he proposed. That model was designed on the principles of limitless growth and endless sprawl. You can always build more suburbs and gas is cheap, but those principles are outdated and unrealistic in this day. A dwelling unit, as I understand it, is typically defined as a housekeeping unit used or intended to be used as a domicile by one or more persons and usually containing cooking, eating, living, sleeping, and sanitary facilities. It makes no distinction on size or footprint. A motorhome fits the definition just the same as an 8-bedroom house. The housing needs assessment found that people are overhoused, a common side effect of limiting the number of dwelling units per parcel. When you can only build one, you build big. That's what we've seen on ALR. At conventions, we hear how communities are looking at reducing restrictions and approving more developments in order to tackle the crisis at a local level. However, in our electoral areas, well, we don't have building permits. We have very limited zoning bylaws. So I had some people ask, how can we deregulate when we're already under-regulated at a local level? How can this regional district approve more developments when we aren't approving developments? I think that's what makes us really special and unique here. Our rural areas are more, well, they're akin to a control group in relation to this 100-year-old experiment and issue. It should be easier for us to transition to a new system as we have less to change. Now, I believe that residential flexibility already exists in our rural areas in the form of tiny homes, granny cabins, mansions, spec homes, motor homes, RVs, buses, communes, people living in boats. It's all over the place. A lot of it's under the radar. The intent of this motion would be to change the OCP policies to better reflect the diversity of housing in the rural areas. The provincial government is also changing the landscape. That's one of the reasons why I think this is so important at this time. 3 things that I've seen the province doing and signaling to do. The first was, well, last term, in order to speed up the rezoning approval process, the province removed the requirement to hold a public hearing when changing zoning bylaws, as long as the changes were consistent with the OCP, streamlined the process. Something else to consider is the proposed Housing Supply Act. It is at first reading. It has the potential of stripping local governments of their decision-making and regulatory powers when it comes to housing, where the province can impose its will upon local government whenever it deems necessary. It's at first reading, so it hasn't been adopted, but they're signaling pretty strong that they kind of like it. Additionally, and this is the big one that brings us to today, in 2022, NDP leadership candidate David Eby told the CBC, quote, he plans to tackle the housing shortage by making secondary suites legal in all communities across BC and allow home builders to replace a single family home with up to 3 units in the same footprint, potentially changing the maximum number of dwelling units on a property currently zoned for 1 to 4. On Nootka Street, we have a zoning bylaw that's purpose is to restrict the number of dwelling units to 1 per hectare. Generally speaking, the residents don't want to see the land covered in structures. They want to keep out the sprawl. They want to live with more green space. Makes sense. But how can the Nootka Street zoning bylaw survive if the new Premier's CBC statement becomes implemented into law? Restricting the land based on the number of dwelling units, in my opinion, no longer seems viable in the current political environment. Instead, I would suggest it seems more logical to regulate based on total square footage or total footprint of residential space. The next question becomes, how much should the maximum footprint be? I believe public input is necessary to determine that number, but I put forward a starting point of 5,000 square feet. And I haven't just plucked that number from the air. That has come from the provincial government's Ministry of Agriculture. In 2018, the province amended the ALR regulations to state that each ALR parcel could have one dwelling up to 5,000 square feet on it. The province, through the ALR, have set their expected maximum for the average typical rural farmhouse. And this has already been implemented on parcels designated as ALR in our rural areas, because when the province writes the rule, it comes into force. The motion speaks to changing the definition of dwelling unit. And over the last few weeks, I've been thinking about it, and perhaps instead a new term can be used to convey the intent, or not even use the term dwelling unit at all. And we can use either the new term or a new definition to update the OCPs. Now, we have zoning bylaws in some of our areas. I mentioned Nootka Street. There's also the Lund Watershed zoning bylaw, and it has language related to total floor area permitted already. But it only is in reference to accessory buildings and structures that are subordinate to the principal use of the land, which is a single family dwelling. So if this was also put into practice on Nootka, then a property that is zoned for one dwelling per hectare and a property that has 1 hectare could then build up to 5,000 square feet of residential building footprint, regardless of whether it was attached or detached from the main structure. So they could either have tiny homes or they could have a triplex, but they would still be constrained to that 5,000 square feet. This would make it easier for us to transition if the new Premier's statement becomes law. And it would also allow people to downsize, because we have a bit of overhousing going on. I would like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to speak to this matter. I hope it stimulates some ideas, discussions, and maybe some solutions as we move forward. Thank you.
I appreciate you right on 10 minutes, Director Gisborne. Congratulations. Any other discussion on the motion?
We don't have a motion.
We don't
Or
currently
sorry, on the recommendation. Thank you. I see a hand there.
His attention.
So can't hear you.
Chair Lennox,
Yes.
we don't actually have a motion on the table yet.
Right, I changed it to a recommendation.
Recommendation comes from staff. This is a, it's an item.
An item. Yeah, thank you for clarification. I see Director McCormick had her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Is it appropriate to
Excuse me,
discuss
Chair
the
Lennox?
item?
Yes.
Chair Lennox, we don't have a motion on the floor.
We just need a mover and a seconder.
Good debate.
We've only had a presentation, Chair Lennox, so we need somebody to make a motion now.
Okay, do I have a mover to make any type of motion?
Well, I'll make a motion.
Okay. Director Brown.
The motion that I make, though, is that the planning committee recommends the board direct staff to report back on possible OCP amendments to increase and improve residential flexibility options, period.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'll second.
Any discussion on the matter, Director McCormick?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have some concerns about this as a possible solution to our housing crisis, which is why at Committee of the Whole, I've asked for a report on what staff believe to be the tools that are needed to increase the housing supply in the region. I don't know if OCP amendments are going to be part of that solution until they've had an opportunity to explore it. If this notice of motion at Committee of the Whole is passed, then I don't know what the right directions are. You know, there's infill housing, there's all kinds of different strategies that can be used. So I would like to see a report back from staff on the more general topic of how to increase housing supply rather than identify OCP amendments at this particular time as a means to accomplish that end. So that may or may not be what, you know, is come up with, but at this point, we don't know. I also think that there's confusion over the term footprint of a building, because a footprint of a building can also include a covered patio, outside space that is in fact ancillary to the basic use of the building, yet is still considered part of the footprint of that building. So I have concerns about using that as a tool. And finally, Harlan Bartholomew, yes, was city planner in Vancouver, most known for his plan to fill in False Creek with a grid road system connecting the downtown peninsula and Point Grey, and develop a ring road freeway system around Spanish Banks Beach. So thank goodness those things didn't happen. Harlan Bartholomew is not a shining example to use. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think I saw Director Brander's hand up, or sorry, Director Doubt.
Yeah, I know I'm not a member of the committee, but I am fascinated in planning, and I'm the city's portfolio holder for planning, and that's been a discussion, and the housing crisis is on everybody's mind, and solutions to it are being thought about. I appreciate Director Brander's motion. I think it's a good one, and it's a proper way to go. I have some concerns about putting a footprint or a square foot maximum on residential buildings on a property when there is currently no limitation. Director Gisborne has talked about a limitation that's placed on agricultural land by the Agricultural Land Commission, but the regional district's bylaws have no restriction on the square footage of a single family dwelling or a dwelling unit. And the dwelling unit and the single family dwelling unit are defined in bylaws for the regional district. Fascinating definitions. They don't require sanitary facilities. They don't require matching BC building code in a lot of cases, but you know, just putting a limitation on the size of the building overall, you know, isn't going to solve the problem. It will create interesting possibilities. One is you could have 10 tiny homes, 10 500 square foot homes, which is something they're doing in Kelowna, putting manufactured 500 square foot homes on the property. You could have 10 of those on one piece of property, or you could have 10, or you could have 20 250 square foot ones, depending on how you do it. I think the board needs to be very careful about approaching these definitions. Really making something possible doesn't create them. The other thing I wanted to talk about without going into it too far is some of the work I've been doing on investigating tiny homes, and they're getting popular all over North America, particularly for the difficult to house. I came across one development that they're doing in Texas, basically for people who are unhoused at the current time, and they've